Orla was on the bus to an important meeting and was very nervous. Everything had gone wrong since the morning. The director did not approve of the staff's absences, and she had a hard time getting permission to leave work earlier, promising to work 2 shifts the next day. A serious snowstorm raged outside, causing terrific traffic jams and disruptions. The parents of her fiancé Dwight were waiting for her at an expensive restaurant for a meeting. She had to travel to the other side of the city and was worried that she wouldn't make it on time. Dwight's family was not ordinary, as they were wealthy businessmen. Dwight's father owned a large corporation, and his character, according to rumours, was terrible, while his mother was known as a social lioness. The poor girl had nothing decent to wear. She begged her friend for a beautiful evening dress and put on a light coat over it. She spent a long time rubbing her old autumn boots with cream to make them look better. There were few people on the bus in such weather, but looking out the window at the heavy snowfall, the passengers were happy to be in the warm salon rather than outside. An elderly man got on at one of the stops. He was shivering from the cold and shaking the snow off his hat and sleeves. Then he reached into his pocket of his old jacket and started rummaging around for change. He turned the pocket inside out, and there was a hole through it. He had no money. Apparently he had dropped it. The old man became embarrassed, lowered his eyes, and quietly went to the very back seat, hoping the bus conductor wouldn't notice him. But no such luck. The woman had been working on the bus for a long time and clearly identified fare evaders. She watched the elderly passenger closely, and as soon as he sat down, she immediately ran over to him and asked loudly, "Sir, pay for your fare? Do you have a card or cash?" The old man blushed and mumbled, "Sorry, please, I dropped my money. There's a hole in my pocket. Look, please. Can I ride 5 stops for free? Please. And it's snowing so heavily outside. I won't be able to walk. There's knee-deep snow." The bus conductor seemed to have been waiting for just this opportunity to vent all her negativity on the poor old man. She immediately started shouting at the entire salon, "Here we go again. I hear these stories every day. Either you pay or get off at the next stop. What nerve! Don't you have any shame? You're already at an age, and yet you're still doing this. Everyone tries to ride without a ticket." Suddenly Orla felt sorry for the poor old man and couldn't stand it any longer. She approached the conductor and said, "Don't shout. Don't kick him off. I'll pay for his ticket. Here, take it. Let him ride. It's cold and snowy outside. How's he supposed to walk?" The bus conductor punched his ticket, grumbling as she handed it to Ola. Oh, what a benefactor. Ola sat next to the old man, and he began to thank her with tears in his eyes. "Thank you so much. My name is Greg Savito. I didn't expect such a blizzard to start. It was sunny and quiet in the morning. And I'll pay you back the money. Don't worry. I have money at home. I don't know how I didn't notice the hole in my pocket. Oh," my heart started aching now. I guess because of stress. Orla immediately took out a tablet from her purse, which she always carried with her, as her mother had heart problems, and gave it to the old man. "Here, put it under your tongue and let it dissolve. It will calm you down. My mother constantly has it. You know what? I'll ride with you and see you home, just in case. It's such a blizzard outside. I'm afraid you won't make it home alone. By the way, my name is Orla." The old man looked at her gratefully and began to dissolve the tablet. "Thank you so much. You hardly ever meet such kind people like you, Orla. Many people don't care about their own elderly relatives, let alone strangers. Please forgive me, I've imposed it on you. You probably have your own things to do. It's even embarrassing, really." Orla waved her hand. "Well, actually, yes, I'm going to an important meeting. They're already waiting for me, but never mind. A person's life is more important. I hope they'll understand me." The girl had passed her stop and got off with Mr. Savito, helped him get to his apartment, and only then calmed down and ran back to the stop to finally get to the restaurant. The phone still wasn't working, and the connection was still missing in such nasty weather. As a result, Orla was an hour late, and she entered the restaurant all wet, red with snow, which mercilessly blew in her face. Her makeup was smudged and runny, and there was no trace of the beautiful hairstyle. She started apologizing. "Good afternoon. Excuse me, please, for being late. Unforeseen circumstances. I had to help the elderly man to get home safely due to the snowstorm. He wouldn't have made it on his own. I'll be right back. Quickly clean up and return to you." Dwight's mother looked displeased at her watch and criticized the tardiness. "It's inappropriate to be an hour late, especially when respected people are waiting for you. Who knows what might happen next?" It was clear to her that the girl was not well versed in good manners. Dwight ran after Orla and started scolding her in the foyer for being late. "Orla, what are you doing? My parents are furious. We agreed to meet at 3. Where have you been? It's really inappropriate to be so late, and it's considered bad manners in polite society." Orla tried to justify herself. "I didn't do it on purpose. You are lucky you can get in your SUV and have a ride. Warm, beautiful and comfortable. And I had to take the bus across the entire city. I even helped an old man. I couldn't just leave him in trouble. My mother has heart problems too, and I know how it can be dangerous." Dwight waved his hand and responded, "You're always like Mother Teresa. Someone else would have helped. All right, hurry up, please." Dwight's mother, Laura, was not thrilled with her son's choice. She did not approve of the fact that her son was involved with a simple waitress, living in a shabby apartment with his sick mother. Dwight's father was a resourceful man who made a quick and dizzying career rise 2 years ago, becoming a respected and wealthy businessman. Despite many city dwellers being unaware of where he got such a huge starting capital, his success was undeniable. Mr. Chester had long ago picked out a profitable party for his son, the daughter of the head of their business partner, Julia. He dreamed of merging companies, and marrying his son would be the best solution. However, Orla appeared out of nowhere and messed up all the plans. This is why Dwight's parents wanted to get rid of her so badly. That's why they arranged this meeting on their own initiative, specially in an expensive restaurant, and ordered the most exotic dishes, oysters, lobsters, and Japanese fish. They were sure that this country girl had no idea what it was called or how to eat it. They hoped she would be humiliated in front of everyone, and their son would leave her himself. And everything turned out as they had planned. Orla sat there, red as a boiled lobster, and only drank water. She didn't know how to use tongs and skewers to cut the lobster, and she didn't know what to do with oysters either, as they didn't serve such delicacies at their cafe. In addition to Dwight's parents, family friends, equally pretentious snobs, sat at the table. Against their background, Orla looked like a poor orphan. Dwight, for some reason, was sitting across from her, not next to her. Suddenly, Lara sarcastically asked, "Orla, baby, why aren't you trying anything? The oysters are fresh and I highly recommend them. Or do you not like seafood?" The girl blushed even more and responded, "Well, I don't like it much. And I've eaten at home." The future mother-in-law continued to mock her. "Well, as you wish. Tell me, Orla, where are you studying? What university? What faculty? Or are you already working in your profession? Because my son is silent and I can't get a word out of him, and we're interested in knowing with whom Dwight plans to tie his fate." Orla blushed again and explained, "It just so happened that my mother is very sick. She has heart problems. She needs an expensive operation to replace the valve. So, after finishing school, I had to work to help her. I'm currently working as a waitress in a cafe, and I'm also a courier on weekends." But as soon as my mother gets better, I plan to go to college, to the pedagogical faculty, because I love children very much." One of the guests interrupted the conversation and sarcastically remarked, "And what will you teach them? To wash dishes and set the table? Bravo! Well, Dwight, I'm really shocked by you." Laura looked significantly at her son and said, "Sonny, are you sure you didn't mix anything up? Did you invite a decent bride or the first waitress you saw?" Then the woman smirked at Orla and said in a sweet voice, "Sweetie, if you just want money, you can work at my house as a maid. That would suit you better than being our son's bride, because I see you don't have any other talents." Orla wanted to disappear through the floor and looked at the groom with hope. She expected him to stand up for her and tell his shameless mother that he loved her and that she was not a maid but his bride. But no, Dwight was sitting silently like a mouse. He was angry at Orla. He was embarrassed that she really acted like a commoner. He was ashamed in front of his father's influential acquaintances. Now everybody would start to gossip that Dwight Chester got involved with a waitress. His overbearing mother answered for him, "You know, Orla, we will not keep you. Dwight will stay with his family and you will go. You found your way here, then you will get back on your own. All the best to you." Orla couldn't tolerate such mockery anymore and ran away from the table in tears. She hastily put on her coat and rushed out of that hateful place like a madwoman. Inside, she was boiling with hurt and anger. How could they do this? Why did they insult me? And Dwight, he didn't even say a word in her defense. Wimp. Mama's boy. Let them all go with their family. Orla, crying, barely made it home and had to trudge through huge snowdrifts, half the way since the buses were no longer running and the roads were not cleared. The snow was everywhere, inside her coat and boots. It melted and flowed in streams over her body, but the girl didn't even notice it. She entered the apartment all wet and frozen like an icicle, and immediately threw herself into her mother's embrace. "Mum, I feel so bad. Can you imagine? They all looked at me as if I were nobody or dust, and frankly, they made fun of me for being a waitress. Dwight's mother called me a maid, saying it was the most appropriate place for me in their family. And Dwight didn't support me. He didn't even take me home. He sat there silently, as if I weren't his bride, but a punching bag. Why did they invite me there at all? Did they want to shame me and make me a laughingstock? And they succeeded. I'll never forgive him for this disgrace. Let him go to hell. It's better to be a waiter than to let others walk all over you." Helen stroked her daughter's head, comforting her as best she could. "Don't cry, my good girl. It breaks my heart to see you like this. God will judge them all. And about the groom, I've been telling you for a long time that nothing will come of it. You're not a match for him. It didn't cost him anything to bring you and take you back home, so you wouldn't freeze. But he didn't do it. He didn't stand up for you or take care of you. How can you build a future with him? If a man genuinely loves a woman, he'll go to great lengths for her and won't let anyone hurt her. Your dad was just like that. It's a pity he died so young. He didn't have time to get you back on your feet. I trusted him completely. And it's not about money. It's about how he treated me. And if your groom treats you so badly now, what will happen in the future? Let's have a cup of tea with mint and strawberry jam. You're so cold, you might get sick. Let's calm down." Orla hugged her mother and whispered, "Thank you, Mummy, for your support, warmth and tenderness. It means so much to me. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you how I met Mr. Servito, the elderly man on the bus. The bus conductor wanted to throw him out into the cold because he lost his money. I felt so sorry for him. He was clean, neat, but just old. So I paid for him. And then he felt sick, so I escorted him home. That's why I was late for that damn restaurant. If I knew they would disgrace me like that, I wouldn't have come at all." Helen praised her daughter, saying, "You did everything right. Don't blame yourself. You always have to try to help people. Anything can happen in life. You're such a smart girl, and I'm proud of you. If it weren't for my illness, you would have already studied to be a teacher. And you did so well in school. Everything will be all right for you, my good girl." After that terribly snowy evening, Orla fell ill and took a week off work with a cold. All this time, offended, she did not pick up the phone when Dwight called, and the relationship between them almost came to naught. One day, after working 2 shifts, Orla took her mother to the doctor, where she ran into the same old man from the bus. They hugged like old friends. "What a coincidence. How are you, Mr. Servito? Are you sick too? I brought my mother to the doctor. Mum, meet Greg Servito, the passenger I told you about. And this is my mother, Helen." Mr. Servito sighed heavily and said, "I never told you then. I went to my son's grave that day. It was his birthday. I should visit him, especially since the weather was calm in the morning, and nothing foreshadowed such a snowstorm." Paul was engaged in the sale of real estate, and he was very successful. 2 years ago, he was murdered. Paul went to important negotiations in another city. His body was found in a strip of forest, completely disfigured and burned beyond recognition. When I was told about it, I immediately had a hypertensive crisis, and I don't remember anything good about it. At the identification, I was in a fog. I only saw my son's watch and chain. His documents lay next to the car. I don't know how or why I'm still alive. The only consolation I have is going to my son's grave and talking to him there. It seems to ease the pain a little. Unfortunately, they never found those rascals. The place was deserted, there were no witnesses, and all the leads were dead ends. My son was the meaning of life for me, the dearest person. 2 years have passed, and I still can't come to terms with it. I keep his things, I don't touch anything in the room, and I sit there for a long time. Orla was shocked, as was her mother. They felt sorry for this elderly man who had lost his only support in life, his beloved son, and was now barely making ends meet alone. Meanwhile, Mr. Servito suggested, "Come visit me sometimes. Orla, just to chat. I'll be delighted." The girl went to visit the elderly man the next weekend. Even though she and her mother didn't live richly themselves, she ran to the store and bought cookies, some groceries, wanting to please Mr. Servito, who was clearly saving on everything. The elderly man was happy to have a guest and started bustling around, putting the kettle on the stove and thanking her. "Orla, how glad I am that you came. Why did you spend so much? I'm even embarrassed, honestly." The girl objected. "Everything will be useful, Mr. Servito. Please, eat and enjoy. I understand that you can't live well on one pension." "Don't worry, I have everything I need," the old man replied. "You know, after my son's death, a good amount of money comes to my pension card every month. It says it's from a charity fund. It really helps. It's hard to believe that such a thing is possible in our time. Sit down and we'll have tea now. I even have a real honey. A friend of mine who keeps bees treated me out of kindness." Orla spoke with Mr. Servito for a long time, and he showed her a photo of his deceased son. The girl looked at this pleasant, smiling young man, and she couldn't believe that he was no longer alive. He was only 30 years old. The old man discussed his life, and it was clear that he missed communication a lot. "By the way, I am a teacher by education. I taught mathematics at the university all my life. Many people still remember and know me. And my wife Tammy worked as a saleswoman. She had a talent for trading. We met when I came to buy vegetables and fish. She advertised everything to me so much that I left with a huge bag. I immediately liked Tammy. She was like Thumbelina, small with a laugh like a bell and mischievous curls on her head. We lived soul to soul, and we hardly ever quarrelled. But God didn't give us children for a long time. At first we were worried and we ran to the doctors. But what was medicine like then? They just shrugged their shoulders. Then, unexpectedly, when we turned 45, Tammy got pregnant. She couldn't believe it at all. She thought it was menopause. All the doctors, without exception, advised against giving birth. My wife had serious problems with her heart, blood vessels and vision. But Tammy insisted, and no matter what, she decided that if God gave her a baby, she had to give birth. After all, she couldn't give up her cherished dream of becoming a mother. The pregnancy was difficult, and she barely made it. Unfortunately, all of this only worsened her chronic diseases. Our son was growing up, and my wife and I cherished him with all our hearts. But my wife was getting sicker and sicker. She often stayed in the hospital, and her condition kept deteriorating. And when our son Paul turned 10, my beloved Tammy passed away. I grieved and suffered, and my son missed his mother. It felt like someone had cut off my arm or leg. That's how close my wife and I had become. Right before she passed away, in the ICU, my wife told me, "You know, Greg, if everything could be changed, I wouldn't change a thing. Paul is the greatest joy of my life, and I have no regrets. Remember that. Take care of our son, and do everything to make him happy. I love both of you so much." After she said those words, I cried all night. I kept thinking, why did this happen? Some people have 5 children, and nothing happens to them. And here we are with just one child, and her health was shaken a lot. My son and I started living alone. I noticed that Paul had a commercial streak in him, which had manifested in small things since childhood. It was probably something he inherited from his mother. I decided to send him to study business and management, and it paid off. He graduated from the university with honours and started developing his business. He began with retail, opening a couple of booths, and then slowly started expanding. He began to deal with real estate, buying broken-down apartments, fixing them up, and then selling them at a good price or renting them out. With time, he even opened an agency. He didn't waste money on trivial things and invested everything in his business. And 2 years ago, he was about to meet with one of his partners for a very risky deal. He was going to sell his entire business and invest in I tried to dissuade him and asked him to think it through, but he didn't listen to me. And after my son's death, his business also fell into the wrong hands, and I was left with nothing. Are you planning to get married? Such a beautiful and kind girl can't be alone for long. Do you have a fiancé? Orla became sad. Everything fell apart with me and my fiancé. We're from different worlds. I'm just a waitress, and he's the son of a businessman. We met by chance when he dropped his wallet at the bank, and I returned it to him. He was very surprised, saying that such things don't happen in our time. I immediately liked Dwight. He was my first love, and he wasn't a snob. We were comfortable together. But his parents apparently thought differently. They held a meeting for me, specifically in a fancy restaurant, just to shame me. And Dwight just sat there like a statue and said nothing. I can't forgive him for that. And that's how we fell out. Am I to blame that my mum is sick and needs surgery? And where am I supposed to get the money? I had to work instead of going to college, even though I dreamed of becoming a teacher. But I believe that I'll save enough money to go to college, even if it's a couple of years later. Mr. Savito just raised his hands. You're such a wise and intelligent girl, Orla, beyond your years. You're doing everything right. And don't worry about your fiancé. That just means he didn't really love you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let you go. They talked for a long time, and when Orla was about to leave, she suggested they visit the grave together the next time. The elderly man was delighted. Of course I'll be glad. Thank you for everything, Orla. I was so lonely after my son's death, but now I've met you and your mother, and it's easier on my soul. It's nice to have someone to talk to. The following weekend, Orla and Mr. Savito went together to Paul's grave, just as they had planned. The cemetery was deserted, especially in winter. The silence was eerie, and the only sound was the snow crunching under their feet. And suddenly, from a distance, they saw a tall man standing near Paul's grave. He had his hands in his jacket pockets, and he was wearing a hood. Mr. Savito began to move faster. Something subtly familiar seemed to him in the figure of that man. As he got closer, he asked, "Hello, who are you? Did you know my son? Tell me, I beg you." The man threw back his hood sharply, revealing a deep scar on his cheek. It was Paul himself, alive and unharmed. Mr. Savito could only whisper, "Oh my God, my son, I can't believe my eyes, you... But how?" And the elderly man fell unconscious right into the snow. Orla and Paul rushed to help the elderly man. They rubbed snow on his cheeks and unbuttoned his jacket collar. Thankfully, Mr. Savito began to come to his senses. Seeing his son, he crossed himself and cautiously touching his hand, exclaimed, "You're really alive. Paul, my son. But then, who has been lying here for 2 years? Whom did I mourn? Whom did I bury? How did this happen? Where have you been all this time?" The man hugged his father, held him close, and stood there for a long time. Tears flowed down his cheeks as he whispered, "Forgive me, Dad. I couldn't let you know about me earlier, no matter how hard I tried. But I missed you so much. Let's go home. We'll talk about everything there. It's a very long story." Orla felt uncomfortable and thought it was a family matter. "Well then, I'll go. You probably need to be alone together. I'm not needed here." But Paul stopped her. "No, Orla, you should be here. And soon you'll understand why. Don't be surprised. I know your name. I've been following my father's life from afar. What I'm going to tell you concerns you directly." The girl wondered how the lives of complete strangers could concern her, and Paul began his long and convoluted story. "Remember, Dad, on that fateful day, I went to important negotiations. I was planning to have a new partner. At the gas station, one guy, slim and quiet-looking, asked me for anyway. For some reason, he sat behind me. I told him, 'What are you doing? It's uncomfortable back there. Sit in the front.' But he only waved his hand and said, 'I want to take a nap. I haven't slept all night.' On the way, we were passing a grove, and my companion, Igor, asked to stop. His stomach was cramping and he couldn't bear it. So I turned off the road, drove into the woods a little and turned off the engine. And then that scoundrel attacked me from behind with a rope. I still have a scar from that. At first I struggled, but then the light went out. That's it, I don't remember anything else. I woke up a couple of hours later on the wet ground. Blood was pouring from a wound on my side, all beaten up. And moreover, a bunch of pine brush was on me. He buried me there, alive. I thought I was dead, and such anger came over me. No, I thought, I won't die for anything until I find out who did this to me. I started to get out of there somehow, crawling, not knowing where, all night through excruciating pain. I lost consciousness several times, then came to and crawled again. In the morning, a big dog ran up to me and started to howl strangely. I thought for sure that my end had come now. I closed my eyes, lay there afraid to move, and prayed, "Lord, help me." And then the gamekeeper ran up to me on a dog's howl, threw me over his shoulder and carried me to his hut. I begged him, "Don't take me to the hospital. They'll find me there and finish me off. If I die, bury me in the woods, please." And I lost consciousness again. I only woke up a couple of days later. The wounds were severe. The man took care of me for a long time. He gave me antibiotic shots, made me drink herbal infusions, and made all kinds of compresses. I owe him so much. So 6 months went by. I was so weak that I almost didn't walk. I just lay there, and when I got better, I quietly returned to the city. I started to help you because I had money in a secret place. I was always thrifty, saving up, and it was helpful. And here's what I found out. It turns out that the same guy who sat next to me in the car then, Igor, was a hired hitman. They paid him a lot of money to get rid of me. He thought he had done away with me and left me there in the woods. But the guy was very greedy for money, so he took everything from me, down to the last thread, and put on my watch, my gold chain, my leather jacket, and of course he took my wallet with money. And he decided to transfer the car to another place, farther away to cover his tracks. But he didn't count on one thing. His customer himself was following us. He wanted to make sure the job was done, and also to get rid of the performer, so as not to pay him, and so that there were no extra eyes and ears. Orla couldn't resist and asked, "So who was the customer? What kind of monster would do something like this? I just can't wrap my head around it." Paul raised his finger and replied, "The customer, Orla, was Michael Chester. He was supposed to be my new partner, but he tried to kill me, took over my business and assets, and lived like a king. I did all the research." The girl even paled and said, "It can't be. He's Dwight's father. Are you sure about this, Paul? The Chesters boast about having a model family and being businessmen from high society. They humiliated me. They said I'm not on their level. Did Mr. Chester really resort to murder?" Paul sadly smiled and said, "He isn't a respectable businessman at all. I didn't know about it at the time, but he offered me an attractive project to work on together, and I fell for it. I was taken out, and he took it all for himself. Then he went up very fast with my money. I gathered all this information bit by bit, and I already have a whole folder of evidence. All that's left is to dramatically come back to life and force this scoundrel to confess, and then go to the police with it." Mr. Savito just shook his head and said, "What a terrible man with a black soul. How can one live peacefully knowing that he's involved in the deaths of 2 people? You're right, son. We can't leave it like this. He must be punished for all his actions." "I know how," suddenly said Orla. "I'll go straight to his office and say that I have an important conversation to have about me and his son. And then I'll hint that I saw Paul alive and well, and I know everything. And I'll turn on the recorder and see his reaction. After that, we'll go to the police." Mr. Servito waved his arms and said, "No, Orla, don't do it. Please don't get involved in this terrible story. It's very risky. You could be in danger, as such a type won't stop at anything." But the girl replied sharply, "These people offended me for no reason. They made fun of me, and my fiancé even turned away. So I can't stand by and do nothing. I want to look into his eyes." "Orla," said Paul, "thank you for your involvement. You're a very good, kind and open-hearted girl, but I can't let you take any risks. I'm categorically against this reckless idea. I haven't revealed myself for so long for nothing. I've been gathering evidence, so even without Michael's confession, I still have enough evidence, and the scoundrel will get what he deserves. If the police start dragging their feet, I'll go to the prosecutor's office. I won't rest until Michael Chester is behind bars and I restore my honest name and get my capital back. I earned it all with my own sweat. Thank you very much for helping my father back then, for supporting him. We'll still be friends, but I'll deal with everything first." Paul took on the case with great enthusiasm. He was very lucky that this difficult and convoluted case fell into the hands of an experienced investigator. He didn't take bribes and did his job conscientiously. He was a very thorough and persistent police officer. He insisted on a confrontation between Paul and Michael because the businessman denied his involvement in the story. When Paul walked into the investigator's office, Michael's face changed beyond recognition, as if he didn't believe until the very end that Paul had really survived. He saw with his own eyes how Igor killed him with a knife. Paul smirked wickedly and said, "Well, hello there, dear partner. Didn't expect this turn of events. I thought you had killed me, and it was all over. Did you enjoy your life with my money? Now justice needs to be served." Michael Chester felt as if his mind had become clouded. He crossed himself and whispered, This can't be. Be gone, evil spirit, you're dead. I saw your body. You won't be able to prove anything. It's all nonsense. Paul smiled even wider. You're not all-powerful. My people will testify in court and confirm that you illegally appropriated the business. And the hunter who found me in the woods is already giving testimony. Why did you need all this? Was it all just for money? Michael suddenly grinned. You won't prove anything. I won't sign anything. My lawyers will still release me. Then followed long trials and investigations. In court, the gamekeeper and his wife gave testimony, as did a few loyal employees who did not sell out to the new owner and knew about his dark deeds. The court hearings lasted several months. The meticulous investigator, like a bulldog, clung to Michael Chester and dug up many interesting facts, in addition to this bloody case. In total, Michael Chester was sentenced to 15 years with the confiscation of all his property and stolen business, which was rightfully returned to Paul. Mr. Savito cheered up after his son returned alive. He even looked a little younger. Life had meaning again. Orla continued to work diligently, collecting all the money for the operation. Her mother's condition worsened, and she was admitted to the cardiology department. Time was working against her, and a quarter of the amount had not yet been accumulated. The girl was already on the verge of despair. She was thin, sleep-deprived, and torn between work and visiting her mother in the hospital, trying to cheer her up. One day she was just finishing her shift at the cafe when she unexpectedly received a call from the hospital. The girl's heart sank and seemed to stop altogether. The thought raced through her head. Is it all over? But the nurse briskly told her, Orla, your mother's operation has been fully paid for and approved. We are preparing her for tomorrow. Could you come by to sign the documents? Orla could not believe what she heard. How? Paid for by whom? It's a huge amount of money, isn't it? The nurse replied incredulously, I thought you knew. The man did not introduce himself. He preferred anonymity. But in any case, this is wonderful and very timely. There is no more time left. The condition is critical. The girl almost shouted, I'm already on my way. Thank you so much for the news. Orla was riding on a bus wondering who this magician could be. Dwight definitely could not. And then it dawned on her. Paul, it's definitely him. There's no one else, is there? The girl dialed his number with trembling hands and almost shouted, Paul, my dear, you're my saviour. Thank you. I knew it was you who paid for my mother's operation. No one else is capable of that. I'm forever in your debt now, and I'll give you everything I have. I have some of the money, and the rest I'll pay off in installments. The man interrupted her, saying, Don't even think about it. Your money will still be helpful for your mother's rehabilitation. You don't owe me anything. This is from the bottom of my heart. I wish your mother a speedy recovery. After all, you also helped my father and supported him in a difficult moment, without thinking about yourself. The operation was successful, and Helen began to recover. Orla took time off work and spent all her time at her mother's bedside, helping her recover faster and supporting her. Paul was also there, not leaving the girl. They became very close, talked a lot and became friends, although Paul more and more caught himself thinking that he really liked this sweet, kind and responsive girl. When she looked at him with her huge green eyes, with big fluffy eyelashes, something turned over in his soul, and it became so warm and good. He wanted to be by her side, to protect and take care of Orla, and not to part with her for a moment. Something unimaginable was happening to the girl too. She often looked in the mirror, grooming herself, wanting to become prettier, to please Paul. The 10-year difference between them was not felt at all. She did not even notice the scar on his face. For Orla, Paul was like a knight, like the ideal man. Paul immersed himself in business. He needed to make up for all that was missed in 2 years. But the more he worked hard, the more he caught himself thinking that it did not bring him the drive and satisfaction as it did before the attack. Now, after meeting with Orla. He wanted only one thing, more than anything else in the world: to have a strong family, to have children, so that not only his father, but also a beloved and loving woman would be waiting for him after work. Orla finished her shift at the cafe, exhausted beyond belief. Her legs were still buzzing. Suddenly, Paul entered the cafe with a huge, beautiful bouquet of crimson roses. He approached the stunned girl and handed her a bouquet. "This is for you, Orla. You are as beautiful as these roses. I realized that I couldn't live without you. I want to be there for you and always support you. I love you. Will you marry me and be my wife?" Orla was speechless, tears streaming down her face. She just swallowed them and nodded in agreement. Then Paul approached her, took her hand and gently kissed it, holding her close like the most precious treasure. Visitors and girls from the kitchen applauded. It was so sincere and touching. Orla quickly changed into something more comfortable and got into the car with Paul. She breathed a sigh of relief and enjoyed stretching her tired legs. The man said to her, "You won't work here anymore, starting tomorrow. And no more side jobs. You'll ruin yourself like this. I want you to study, get the profession you dream of, and enjoy life, instead of exhausting yourself. And don't worry about money. My earnings will be enough for everyone. What would you like to study?" Orla looked at Paul with gratitude and said, "I love children very much and would like to become a teacher or educator. It's restful for me to be with kids." "Thank you, Paul. You're like a good wizard who entered my grey life and fulfilled my most cherished and unfulfilled desires. You're the best." The man was very pleased with such warm and sincere words. His heart beat faster, and he said decisively, "Tomorrow we're going on a yacht ride on the river. I promise a sea of positivity. I've come up with such a route, and the nature there is wonderful. You'll definitely like it. Besides, the weather is just perfect. It's a sin to stay at home." Orla spent a long time getting ready, anticipating her meeting with Paul. She wanted to please him. She put on a light, long flowing dress made of weightless fabric, let her long hair down, and put on summer sandals with ankle ties. Paul was waiting for his now fiancée at the pier, at the yacht club. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Orla from afar. She looked like a princess, fresh, beautiful, and impossible to take one's eyes off. The man had prepared everything carefully. The table was already set on board the yacht with champagne, light snacks, and fresh, fragrant strawberries. Pleasant romantic music was coming from the speakers, and the couple set off on a romantic journey. It was unforgettable. Orla felt like she had stepped into a fairy tale. They chatted happily, drank champagne, admired nature, and passionately kissed. And then Paul couldn't resist. He picked up his beloved in his arms and carried her to the cabin. Orla surrendered, and they were caught up in the whirlpool of passion. Paul, unlike her ex-fiancé Dwight, didn't promise her gold mountains or read poetry. He simply did everything that day to make her happy. He proved his love with deeds, and it was worth it. From that day on, the couple never parted for a moment. Orla quit her job at the cafe and entered the college, to the pedagogical department. Finally, her dream came true. She enjoyed going to lectures and taking exams, and soon became one of the best students in her class. Paul decided to buy a house outside the city and move everyone there. There was plenty of space, and everyone had their own room. Mr. Servito and Helen became friends, loved to talk about life together, and even arranged a small garden and flower bed so they wouldn't be bored. They were both happy that their children's destinies had intertwined, and that Orla and Paul were now together. Orla was absolutely happy because Paul became everything to her: husband, father, and friend. He was the wisest, most understanding, and best in her eyes. And for Paul, Orla was like his muse. He couldn't live without her, like without air. As for Dwight, after his family was sent to prison with confiscation He and his mother ended up on the street without a penny. All their cards and accounts were blocked. And the so-called friends and acquaintances from high society immediately disappeared and wanted nothing to do with the impoverished family with a tarnished reputation. The guy had to urgently find a job to survive. But what was he good at? What was he worth on his own? It turned out that without an influential daddy, he was nobody, zero, and not fit for life at all. They rented a modest apartment on the outskirts with the remaining savings, and now the mother was mercilessly berating Dwight, demanding that he came up with something. The woman was used to luxury and wealth, and now it was unbearable for her to languish impoverished. But nobody took Dwight without experience, and after the story about Paul's resurrection and Dwight's father's involvement in the murder, all doors immediately closed, often without explanation. Dwight often remembered Orla, regretted that he had embarrassed her so much, did not support her, and yet she loved him just for himself, not because of his money or his father's position, but sincerely from the heart. And the guy couldn't take it anymore. He broke down and started drinking, at first sporadically, then more and more often, making ends meet with occasional odd jobs and leading a miserable existence. From a self-confident, brutal, handsome man, there was no trace left. Now he was just a common labourer in a shopping centre or at a market, wearing a cap, cheap jeans from the sale and a t-shirt. One day, Dwight was unloading a truck with furniture. Sweat was pouring into his eyes and his back was breaking. He caught a glimpse of a couple entering the shopping centre out of the corner of his eye. A solid man in an expensive suit, about 35 years old, and a young beautiful girl in a stylish dress were chatting happily about something. The girl seemed painfully familiar to Dwight, and it hit him. This is Orla, my ex-fiancée. My God, how she has changed and become so beautiful. From a simple girl to a beautiful princess. Lord, what a fool I was. How I would like to be in her partner's place, to cuddle her like before, smell her hair and say those important words, I love you. Dwight was overwhelmed with anger. He couldn't take it anymore and caught up with the couple. When he learned that the man was Paul, he began to shout, So, you stole my fiancée too? All my troubles are because of you. Orla is mine. She was my fiancée. I was rich and successful, and everyone respected me. But now I'm nobody. It's all your fault. You'll get it now. The guards immediately ran up to Dwight, pushing him away and shouting, What are you doing? Haven't you sobered up yet? Get out of here. Then they turned to Paul and Orla and said, We apologize for this awkward situation. We'll remove this rowdy right away. Orla was watching the fallen, drunken Dwight and couldn't believe that it was him. Paul just grinned bitterly and replied, Your money-hungry father went to kill people. His hands are covered in blood up to his elbows, and it's not me, but he himself who is to blame for everything. And forget about Orla forever. You yourself pushed her away, drove her away, and offended her. So bite your elbows, loser. Orla is now my wife. We got married, and we're pleased. My advice to you is not to look for the guilty. Start with yourself. Change yourself inside, achieve everything yourself, and prove that you're worth something. Then life, as you'll see, will get better. Come on, Orla. Our parents are waiting for us at home. Dwight was filled with anger and resentment. He ran out of the shopping centre and rushed to the first bar. He understood that Paul was right about everything, but he couldn't get out of his alcohol addiction, nor did he want to. Orla, meanwhile, cuddling up to her beloved husband at night and listening to his steady breathing, often thought, That's how it happens. One chance encounter on a bus changed my whole life. A coincidence? Or fate after all? Who knows? The main thing is that now I am absolutely